Finishing up our work on this website, the last piece we have is this masthead with the nav bar. We saved it for last, but it's probably going to feel like a little bit of a walk in the park compared to all the different things we had to do here with just the different classes and tangling with specificity. So let's dive in and talk about what we need to do. First of all, we have overall a simple idea in terms of most of it is stacking top down until we get to these items inside of the nav bar that are tiling up side by side. So we can rather quickly get that effect going. Let's make that happen. So that would be a matter of saying that our UL inside of header needs to be display flex so that the items inside of it tile up. Okay, so we're going to go to header UL. So let's see, do we have anything for header yet? Doesn't look like it. So header UL, display flex, and then, you know what, let's make it nav UL. I think that'll be a little bit more easy to recognize later. Nav UL, display flex, and then let's just stick with that for now. All right, so now you see that the items are all tiling up, but they're mashed together. And that's where we begin to get into some of the complexity here in terms of figuring out how we want to space these apart. So on one hand, we can see that they are each 80 pixels apart from each other. However, well, so let's go ahead and try to get that in. So we could do that by, say, right margin after the LIs that pushes each one 80 pixels away. Okay, so that would be a matter of saying nav li get margin right 80 pixels, but let's exclude that from the last item by saying nav li last child margin right 0. Okay, so that applies an 80 pixel right margin, if I get over the right element here, to each of the LIs except for the last one. Okay, that's great. However, we have a little bit of a difference. On one hand, we want to make sure that we get a little bit of an inset on the left. Okay, so that's something to the order of 10 pixels. However, we can see that that 10 pixels is important to note because we want to have this thick border on the sort of active item. Okay, so let's imagine how we might do that. We might go on to our LIs and say border bottom 10 pixels solid white. Okay, so that has gone onto the bottom of, oops, I put it on the last child only. We want that on all of them. All of them. Okay, so they're all getting that white border now, and we won't want that on all of them, so we'll move it in a little bit. But let's also observe another phenomenon. Notice the hit space as we hover over. That hit space goes away when we get down to the border. That's because the hit space is only on the hyperlink. So you can see if I hover over that hyperlink, it's only covering the space right there around the text. And I actually might want that, that border to be part of the hyperlink. So let's move that border onto the nav A tags. So nav A, and these are inline by default, so if we're putting a border on them, we'll want to convert them to display block. Okay, so now you'll see that the positioning doesn't change, but the hit space extends now to include that border, which I'm happy with. Okay, so we have the border in the right place by putting it on the hyperlink there. The other thing we want to do, according to the mockup, is have that sticking out 10 pixels on each side from the text. So that's a pretty straightforward matter of saying we want padding of 0, 10 pixels. So that's 0 top and bottom and 10 on the left and the right. Okay, so now you can see we've accomplished this, and it's even included having a little bit of hit space on the side, which is also kind of nice. Okay. So now you can imagine that the overall space is not right anymore, and that the 80 pixels we put on there is spanning from the edge here to the edge here. And in our mockup, that is not the case. It's spanning from the edge of this text. See, there's 10 pixels different there. So to there to there. So 80 pixels there is what we want. But if we have this little 10 pixels sticking out on each side, we need to reduce that by 10 plus 10, so a total of 20. So we're going to go to our styles and reduce that right margin to 60 pixels. And now that spacing matches what we have in our mockup. Next up, let's just get that little bit of 10 pixels on the left. Maybe we could do that as just a little bit of left padding on that UL, or perhaps on the nav. I think we could do it either place. Since we already have a selector for nav, let's do it there. So nav, oh, I put these all in the wrong spot. I see, because I started out as UL or header. So let's move that down under nav. I've got a couple other things here already I should combine. So this guy is going to go down here, and then that can go away. These can be combined. Nav li, nav li, nav ul. Okay, all right, we're good. Okay, so the nav needs a little padding. Let's do 10 pixels on both sides. 0 top and bottom, 10 on left and right. So we get pushed in 10 over here, and we'll also have 10 on that side, which will just make sure that we never butt right up against the edge. Okay, now you say, Mr. Shanley, we don't have that underline under every one. We only want it on sort of the current page. Well, how do we do that? It's a pretty straightforward matter of putting a class on that actual one. So what I like to do is put the class on the li. So we're on the home page. So this is the active item. Okay, so that means that when we want this to apply, we actually only want it to, that border at least, to apply on the nav active A. So that's an A tag that's inside of something with a class of active that's inside of nav. Okay, so we're going to move this down there. Okay, so that works out, but it does also mean that these don't have the same hit space because that border is now only on these. So here's a little trick. We're actually going to keep the border, but we're going to make it transparent instead of being white or setting a particular color on it. If we make it transparent, now the hit space, let's see, did I do that right? Nav A. (10 pixel solid transparent). Okay, so that hit space is continuing the way it should, but we're just not getting a color there, which is exactly what we want. So we're only getting that color on the active item, but we're not getting it there. So now the other little thing we can do is to modify this to be bottom color, and then only repeat or only set the color there and not repeating the size settings. So those size settings will inherit, but only on the active A will we get the class or will we get that white color. Okay, now we want to make sure that we apply this concept over to all the other pages. So what we're going to need to do is open up our pages one at a time and think about which page, which nav item should appear active on that given page. So for example, on the About page, it's the li wrapping around the About item. So let's test that. So now because the class is here and no longer here, this one appears selected. So on the Products page, we would go to this main item here and say that the Products gets active, and we'll go refresh, and we see that worked. Okay, so we want that same thing on all of the product pages, because even when we're on an inner page, a sort of a page inside of this section, we want the products link to appear like it is the active item. Okay, so the result then is that when we click on these items, we still get the impression that we're in the products section. Okay, and we'll just carry that same idea over to the articles. except it's going to go on the next item up. So on the main articles page, we want the class to be on articles, as we do on the other pages in the articles section. Okay, so this one should appear to be selected. We go to an article, we still appear to be there. We go home, we're there. We jump to another article. It looks like articles. We go to products. It looks like products. We go to about. It looks like about. All right, so we have that all functioning the way it's supposed to. Ooh, it looks like I didn't get my tagline class applied on that about page. Where are you? About page. There you are. What did I do? Because I got deleted it. Oops. There we go. That's better. Okay, so now we can deal with the top to bottom spacing. So a couple of things. First of all, the top here is supposed to be 10 pixels down from the top there, and that should make it flush against the bottom of the nav itself. So let's start by putting, let's see, let's do top, let's close some of our extra files here. This happens a lot around here, right? We open up a lot of files and then we close a lot of files. Okay, so our nav hyperlinks need to be 10 pixels on the top, 10 pixels on the side, but 0 on the bottom. Okay, so you can see that pushed them down a little bit. Now we need to figure out why we're still getting that extra space on the bottom. So as I look over here, I remember, oh yeah, we did. We made all those nav, or made LIs have a margin bottom of 5 by default, which is what we wanted down here when we were, prototyping those lists. But so nav LIs, we should modify to have margin bottom 0. So margin bottom on nav LI 0. So that overwrites the 5 that we had, and now we have that nice little tab feel connecting neatly to the bottom of all of our pages. Okay, let's step up and look at spacing otherwise in the top here. Let's go compare what we have in our masthead overall. Looks like we are pushed down 30 pixels from the top, and the tagline is pushed 20 pixels away from the nav. All right, so let's do this with, oh, and then we're also 20 pixels in on the sides. So I think I want to do this as, let's see, tricksy. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, I wonder if we would simplify things if we pull the nav out of header. It's kind of optional to have nav inside of header, because you see otherwise we'd need to, so we could put the padding right on header, but that would end up pushing the nav in as well, which we don't want. And it'd be nice to not have to put the padding on both of these elements. So yeah, let's actually pull the nav, and of course we'll have to do this on all of our pages now, but that's okay. A little bit of work makes it better anyway. So nav is now outside of header, and we'll work that through on all of our other pages, but let's get it working first. Okay, so now we can go and say that we want the header, and we don't have a header selector, that's fine. So let's go header, and we wanted padding 30 pixels on the top, 20 pixels on the side, and was it 20 below? So 20 there, 20 on the side, 30 on the top. Okay. Cool. All right, so now all we need to do is just work that header change throughout all of our other pages. And we'll check each of our pages to make sure that that's coming through. And that's a sampling, but it shows us that we're off to a good start. So before we wrap it up, we would just want to check through and click on all of our different pages and just double check all of the layouts, make sure that things are working, we don't have any quirks, and also to make sure that all of our hyperlinks are working the way they should. But assuming everything is in good shape, we can call this project done.